Pakistan is in the middle of a financial crisis. What can the new government do to revive its economy? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. With poverty and unemployment on the rise, Pakistan is dealing with economic turmoil. Running out of reserves, the country faces the possibility of asking for another IMF bailout. Pakistan has turned to the IMF 12 times since the late 1980s. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Islamabad last week in an attempt to reset relations between the two countries. Washington has been critical of how Pakistan is dealing with terrorism and cut $300 million in military aid. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also visited Islamabad over the weekend to help promote bilateral ties. The new Pakistani government wants to renegotiate parts of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, claiming it has led to a bigger trade deficit for the country. To discuss the situation in Pakistan, let's meet our panel. Here in the studio, Shuja Nawaz is a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. From Islamabad, the executive director of the Pakistan-China Institute, Mustafa Saeed. Zhao Hai is an assistant research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. He joins us from Beijing, and also with us in the studio, Jonah Blank is a senior political scientist at the RAND Corporation. Welcome to all of you. Let's start in the studio with Shuja Nawaz. Shuja, Pakistan has a new leader, Imran Khan, and he takes office at a very crucial time for the country. It's facing some major economic challenges. He's largely untested, hasn't had experience in high office. How serious are the country's economic problems, and what are the main issues that Imran Khan will have to address?
The problems are serious, and I think he is fully engaged with that. And some of the early steps that he's taken have been in getting together a team in government as well as through the advisory councils of the best and the brightest, regardless of their origin, regardless of what party they worked with in the past, to help advise him. A lot of the issues that Pakistan faces, resource generation, improvement of capacity, etc., are all internal. They don't relate to outside assistance. These are things that Pakistan can and should do on its own. And if it does that, it can then go to outside sources like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, as well as bilateral donors like Saudi Arabia, China, the United States, and others that are prepared to assist Pakistan at this time. Its needs are calculated at roughly something like $25 to $30 billion a year for the next 3 years. This would be for repayment of debt and other obligations. But it also has the capacity. It's not going to be a static situation. It's already investing a fair amount, and it's already getting a fair amount of money from its exports, which have been increasing dramatically, and I can share those details with you later.
Right, just one point on what you say. If he has to put the house in order first before he goes to the rest of the world, does he have political support in Pakistan for that?
I think the support is there. These are the early days, and a lot of people would be willing to give him the time to get things sorted out. Right. But it's a question of being able to chew gum and walk at the same time. Right. So you begin the discussions with outsiders, but you also start showing them that you're serious about fixing things at home, building the capacity, getting the institutions together, and populating them with the right kind of expertise, so that when you send your teams out to talk to countries or to institutions, they are listened to seriously.
Mustafa Saeed, Pakistan seems to be going through something of a realignment phase right now, retuning its relationships with its major partners around the world, with China, with the United States, for instance. Who does Pakistan turn to for help? Does it go to the IMF? Does it go to the United States? Does it go to China? What's next?
Well, it's a tricky situation in Pakistan because the current government criticized previous governments for going to the IMF, for going to Western donors and asking for help, and said that we should use our indigenous resources and opportunities and export-led growth to improve our economy, improve our balance of trade. and eventually they have gone to the IMF. So Imran Khan and his government have made, in the past when they were in the opposition, very tall promises and tall claims. So I would beg to differ from Mr. Shuja Nawaz that they do not have time, and I don't think people will give them time or that margin of error. And as far as the realignment is concerned, I think the best thing that has happened in the past decade to Pakistan was the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which brought Pakistan back on the radar of international investors. And we saw subsequent investment after CPEC by other countries as well into Pakistan. So I think CPEC has really contributed to Pakistan's revitalization, and also, apart from figures and growth, has also given people hope in Pakistan. And I think that whatever realignment takes place, it can't be at the cost of China, and that has been clear when there was a unnecessary controversy by the Minister of Commerce, which he later rebutted, of course. But the controversy was nevertheless there, in which he said that we are giving China the better end of the deal. And later he had to retract his words, because this consensus on the relationship and the strategic partnership, both economic and political, with China amongst all political parties in Pakistan. And all of them are very clear that we can't have two opinions on that and on CPEC.
Okay. Jonah, let's talk about Pakistan's relationship with the United States. It's a complex relationship, and it's been complex for a long time. The United States has accused Islamabad in the past of not doing enough to counter terrorism. Pakistan has said that it's doing all it can. In fact, Pakistan has pointed out many times that it itself has been the victim of terrorism. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, has been in Pakistan, but now the Trump administration has cut $300 million in military aid. How would you characterize this relationship right now?
How complex sums it up, although it only gets at the beginning of it. The U.S. and Pakistan have not merely had a complex relationship since 9/11. The past 17 years, they've had a complex relationship since 1947. This is the third boom and bust cycle between the U.S. and Pakistan that we've witnessed. First during the Cold War, then during the anti-Soviet jihad in Afghanistan, and now since post 9/11. What we've got to remember here is that both sides feel as if they are contributing more and getting less. And that's a bad dynamic on both sides. Mr. Trump has made things even more unpredictable by getting in the way of his diplomats and of the established protocols. So I think that there's a lot of reason to believe that Imran Khan and Mr. Trump will get along personally very well. We saw that with Kim Jong-un and Mr. Trump, but that won't really change the dynamics of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship.
But the U.S. seems to be playing hardball right now, Jonah. You got Mike Pompeo saying he doesn't think the IMF should bail out Pakistan. He doesn't think that IMF money should be used to pay Chinese lenders.
Right, and that is a new twist on the equation. Will the U.S. use what's called its voice and vote to actively prevent an IMF bailout? I suspect that it will not, at least not for a long period, because that would really cause a crisis in Pakistan. And as much as the U.S. is displeased with many actions that the Pakistani government takes or refuses to take, a Pakistan in crisis, a Pakistan in failure, would be a national security threat to the United States.
Okay. Well, let's bring in Zhao Hai. He's in Beijing. And Zhao Hai, the new incoming Pakistani government, we've been hearing, wants to renegotiate some of the Belt and Road Initiative projects with China. It wants to renegotiate the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Pakistan has said that these agreements are giving Chinese companies an unfair advantage over Pakistan. How does China address these concerns? What is China's response to it?
Well, first of all, I think that's just one opinion. It's not the general consensus of Pakistani society, and particularly among the scholars. On the one hand, I think you have the CPEC that has been going on for a couple of years, and that's contributing to the Pakistani economy greatly, as the colleagues has already pointed out. On the other hand, I think after a time period, both from the Pakistan side and from the Chinese side, we need to go back and review the projects and find out the good and bad of those projects. I think the review is a better word to describe the current process instead of renegotiation, because we're not there yet. And after the review, I think there will be a realignment, which means that China will look into what the new administration in Pakistan wants, and they have their own priorities, they have their own concerns, and both sides can sit down and rethink about some of the projects and pay more attention to some of the priorities of the new government, such as poverty or corruption or social programs, and also rebalancing among regions in Pakistan. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but overall the relationship between China and Pakistan has never been better. Because previously this all-weather relationship is mostly about strategic relationship, and now it's all encompassing not only strategic but also political and economic.
Shuja, what's your view on this relationship, the economic relationship between Pakistan and China? I mean, is it a review, a realignment, a renegotiation? What's needed here?
I think there's always ongoing discussions, and Mr. Zhao just laid his finger on it. This is, for the first time in a very long time, that Pakistan is actually going to take advantage of its strategic location, not for geopolitical purposes, but for economic purposes. And in that, CPEC plays a key role. One should be clear, though, that CPEC is not manna from heaven. Neither is it the millstone that many people are describing around Pakistan's neck. It is only one part, a very important part of Pakistan's economic scene and its plans going forward. And we have to put that in perspective, because if you look at the size of the investments in CPEC, the annual average is about $2 to $3 billion a year, whereas the total domestic investment in Pakistan is already $45 to $50 billion a year. And as Mr. Zhao pointed out, within the first couple of years already, some results, in cricket parlance, some runs have been put on the board. So you've added to the electricity generation capacity, which was one of the first of the early harvest stages of CPEC projects. That is allowing growth to pick up. And when growth picks up, you can afford to pay back a lot of the monies that have been invested by the private investors in the independent power producers agreement with China. You also have the issue of debt repayment, which is easier because exports have increased. The latest figures from yesterday indicate a 24% increase in exports in August, which on a year-to-year basis translates to 8% increase. That allows Pakistan to gain a much larger amount from its own export earnings, which allows it to repay the Chinese investors the rates of returns that were promised to them. It's not all perfect, but I think the trajectory and the direction are correct.
Yeah, and we also had a call most recently from the Financial Times that there should be more industrialization in Pakistan.
Well, if you give me a second, let me just break down the way CPEC is structured. It's not all one big ball of wax. There are the early harvest projects, which are from 2015 to 2018. These relate largely to the energy sector, where already runs have been put on the board. Then there are the short-term projects. These are up to 2022. These includes road, they include Gwader development, they include the optic fiber network, and hydroelectricity, coal mining, and power. And then you have the medium-term projects, which go up to 2025, which include railways and industrial zones, the first work on industrial zones. That is now being discussed. And then the long-term projects are the industrial zones completion, as well as agriculture and tourism. So there is a long-term plan, and people are tending to put all of this together and say, oh, this is going to be like Colombo and Sri Lanka's problem with the port. And China will never own Gwader, because that's all grant money. And that's development that will occur in a future phase, which is most of the western corridor in Pakistan is financed entirely by Pakistan.
Okay, we are going to have to take a break right now. There's a lot more to discuss. We'll be back in a short moment. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.